Hi everybody, here is a short little video on cumulative and bar graphs. For this video, our objectives and agenda are going to be the same. So we're going to identify components and uses of cumulative and bar graphs. Now, your three most common graphs in ABA are going to be your line graphs, your cumulative graphs, and your bar graphs. And out of those three, the most common graph that you're going to use is your line graph. And we've talked about line graphs in previous videos, so if you guys need any clarification on line graphs, go back and watch the Graphing in ABA video. But basically, we use line graphs because it allows us to see the progress in our target behavior from day to day. And if we can see that progress, then we can see those trends better. So line graphs allow us to do that. Now, although line graphs are the most common, you guys will see as you're going through in your teaching career, cumulative and bar graphs can be really good assets to you guys. So let's talk about cumulative graphs first. Cumulative graphs are really similar to line graphs in that your x-axis is still going to signify time, so sessions, days, dates, and your y-axis is still going to signify the target behavior and the type of data that you're collecting, so frequency, rate, percentage, things like that. You're still going to have data points in your data paths. What's different with cumulative graphs is that the number of occurrences that you observe in a session are graphed after being added to the occurrences that have been graphed on the previous session. So if you look right here, session 1, there was one occurrence. Session 2, if you look at this number here, there was actually one occurrence, but instead of graphing a 1, you add it to the number of occurrences for the previous session. So you had 1 for session 1, 1 for session 2, that equals a total of 2, so you graph 2. For session 3, there was one instance, so you're going to add 2 plus 1, and that gives you 3. For session 4, there were 2 occurrences, so you're going to add the 3 plus a 2, and that gives you 5. So this is very different in a line graph, because in a line graph, each data point is its own independent data point. So however many occurrences you got in session 2, so if it was 1, you would graph a 1. If you got 2 occurrences in session 4, you would graph a 2. So you're not adding it to the previous session, but in a cumulative graph, you are. So because of that, in a cumulative graph, it always demonstrates an upward curve. So your data path line is never going to go down in a cumulative graph. If a behavior does not occur, you have 0 occurrences, and you're going to add however number of occurrences in the previous session, you're going to add 0, so it's actually going to be a straight line. It's not going to go down. So keep that in mind. And it provides this continuous line with a slope that allows us to see our rate of responding. So if you have a really steep slope, so look over here to the right, it's starting to get steeper and steeper. That means that you have rapid responding. And so you can see the learner had 3 occurrences here and 3 occurrences here. So this slope is a lot steeper, which means more rapid responding. The person is engaging more in the target behavior than as opposed to the 1 instance here. So you have a flatter slope here, steeper here. So the steeper the slope, the more times the person is engaging in the target behavior. A gradual slope, so it is going up, but just gradually, then the person is slowly responding. And if it's a straight line, then there's no responding. So the slope does tell us the rate at which the person is engaging in the problem behavior or responding. Okay, and I wanted to just briefly go over kind of what we talked about in this last slide, but step by step. So we have session 1 where we got 1 response. And so when you have your data sheet, you want to have a cumulative number if you're doing a cumulative graph. Because this is the line that you're actually this is the column that you're actually going to graph. So session 1, number of responses 1, so cumulative total 1. So that's what we graph here for session 1. Session 2, number of responses 1, but remember this is a cumulative graph. So now we're going to add 1 plus 1, and we have a total number of 2 responses. Session 3, we have 1 response. So we're going to add it 1 plus 2, and our cumulative total is now going to be 3. So that's what we graph here. Session 4, we actually had 2 responses. So we're at 3 now, so we're going to add 3 plus 2, and we're going to graph 5. Now session 5, the person did not engage in the target behavior at all. So we have 0 here, and so you're going to add 5 plus 0, and you're going to graph 5. So you can see if the person does not engage in the target behavior, your line doesn't go down. It's going to stay the same because this is a cumulative total. And so on. So 6, 0 number of responses, you're going to stay at 5. And you guys can follow along. So 7 was 1, so we added 5 plus 1, got your 6, which is right here. And then 8, 3 responses, 6 plus 3 gives you 9, so it bumped up here, and you can see that now we have 3 responses as opposed to 1 or 0, so the line is a lot steeper. 9, 3 responses, so you got 3 up here, so you add that and you get to 12, and then the last session, 10, you had 1 response, so 12 plus 1 gives you 13. So that's an example of a cumulative graph. You can use cumulative graphs, for example, to see maybe the number of problem behaviors that a kid has engaged in per month. So you're not really worried, okay, did they engage in 2 problem behaviors on Monday, 1 on Tuesday, 5 on Wednesday. You're interested in the total number of problem behaviors per month. You can also use it on more academic tasks. So the total number of spelling words acquired per week or per month. And so the kid might learn 2 words on Monday and 2 words on Tuesday and 1 on Wednesday. Well, you can take those data for all week and have a cumulative total, so you can have the total number of words learned. You can do it with math facts, the number of math facts learned per week or per month or per semester and things like that. So that's an example of why you would use cumulative graphs. Bar graphs are the 3rd most common graph in ABA. And with bar graphs, we typically use bar graphs to graph categorizational data. So these are going to be a little different than your line graphs in that your y-axis, you still have the target behavior or what you're measuring. It might look a little different, so it might be more of a mean. Whereas your x-axis, instead of it being time, so instead of it being sessions, days, dates, it's typically going to be a category. And so each vertical bar is going to represent 1 observation period. And so this is useful when you may have, when you're measuring maybe a couple of problem behaviors with a student and everything is overlapping on your line graph. You might want to categorize it and use a bar graph. It might be useful when you're summarizing students' data on performance, so mean number of responses across multiple students. So maybe you want to look at an average test score for little Sally, little Susie, and little Johnny. You can put their test scores here and you can kind of compare them. Or it might be useful when you're summarizing a single student's performance across multiple tasks. So maybe you want to summarize their performance in math, and their performance in spelling, their performance in reading. And so bar graphs allow us to do that. Here's an example of a bar graph with regards to a kid engaging in problem behavior. And we can see that on the x-axis we have the categories. They don't have a y-axis label, but we're going to assume number of incidents. And the x-axis is activities, so whether they're in whole group instruction, the resource room, the hallway, the gym outside, the math, and the snack. So you get your different, you get different settings down here, and those are your categories. And then you can see, okay, in whole group instruction, we have 10 incidents. In resource room, we only have about 3. In the hallway, there's only about 1. And so it gives you a way to categorize your problem behavior and compare it across settings or situations or categories, essentially. You might use a bar graph. Maybe you want to look at the mean number of spelling words, and you want to compare Miss Smith's second grade or second period class to Mr. Welsh's second period class. So you have 2 second periods. You're on the x-axis, you would have Miss Smith's class and Mr. Welsh's class, and on the y-axis you would have mean number of spelling words. So you could go in and figure those data out for the 2 classes and compare them. Or you might want to compare, maybe if you're a reading teacher, the number of, or if you're working on spelling, maybe number of spelling words in your first period compared to your second period, compared to your third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. So on the x-axis, you would have your different periods, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you would calculate the mean number of spelling words per period, and you could see maybe my 6th period is doing a little bit better, or maybe my 1st period is doing amazing, and my 6th period is not, and then you can maybe start to analyze those data. All right, last thing I wanted to touch upon to kind of conclude our graphing section is that in ABA, whenever you take data, you always want to graph your data immediately after you take the data. And that's because you always want to have an up-to-date visual representation and visual summary of the data, so that way you can always evaluate the trends on the data, the trends in the data. So, and if you can't graph immediately, then take some time at the end of the day and graph all your data, so that way you can see those trends every day. It's really important. So I like this picture. It says first ABA, then wine. So before you guys leave for the day, preferably right after you collect data, but I know you guys are busy as teachers, so if that's not possible, then at the end of the day, take some time, graph your data, and then go home and have your wine or your beer or spend time with your family, whatever it is. But first ABA, first graph, then go do what you need to do. All right, guys, so we talked about cumulative graphs, we talked about bar graphs, and then make sure that you are always graphing immediately. So don't let 1 week go by and then graph. So take your data, graph at least at the end of the day. All right, guys, if you have any questions about cumulative graphs, about bar graphs, then please email me. Thanks for listening, guys.